Good evening, everybody, and welcome to a wonderful evening of Windfall reading. My name is Wendy. I work here at the Eugene Public Library, and we're very happy to have you here to hear a couple of excellent authors read their work. Just a few really quick thank yous, heartfelt thank yous, and a quick nod to the folks watching on YouTube. Welcome as well. So this is streaming live. Ask the readers, if at all possible, to read it, to carry on through the microphone if you can, because sometimes this doesn't pick up very well. But hopefully everyone can hear what you're saying. So just a few thank yous. First, to the Lane Literary Guild. We very much appreciate the partnership we've had with them during for Windfall all these years. This is one of our first live in-person readings, so it's very exciting, our third of the year. We take a break in December, and we'll be back in January 2024 in this room. So lots more readings to come. I also want to thank the Friends of the Eugene Public Library and the Eugene Public Library Foundation. Both groups fundraise tirelessly. They advocate for early literacy, for adult literacy, for programs, all sorts of things. And without their work and their good cheer and their volunteering, none of this would be possible. So many thanks to them as well. At the end of the readings, there will be a question and answer session, and Joan will have more to say about that. And you'll get a chance to ask questions, to make comments, and you're welcome to do so also online. And I will keep track of that, and we can read those at the end too, if you would like to do it that way as well. Trying to think if there's anything else. We do have a restroom right around the corner if anybody needs to use it. And feel free to stand up and grab some snacks or beverages as you wish. So again, welcome everybody. And now if I could please introduce. Oh yes, oh thank you. And the authors brought books for signing, for purchase. So please afterwards ask them about it and buy them online. All right, and now if I could please introduce Joan from the Lane Literary Guild. Welcome.
So, because my eyes are so not good, I've printed up my introductions in large. Can you hear me well now? Am I speaking through the mic? Okay. And our first reader today will be Scot Siegel. And Scot is the author of 3 books of poetry and 3 chapbooks. He has received awards and commendations from the Oregon Poetry Association, Nimrod International, Aesthetica in the UK, Poetry Northwest, and the Oregon State Library. Scot has served as artist in residence with Playa at Summer Lake and Oregon State University Spring Creek Project. He is also a poet with Writing the Land, including work for the McKenzie River Trust. And his poetry is part of the permanent art installation along the Portland-to-Milwaukie light rail orange line. For more information, www.scottsiegel.com. And when you say Scot, his Scot has only 1 T in it. Welcome.
Joan. Can you hear me all right? Okay. Thank you, Wendy, and the Eugene Public Library and the Lane Literary Guild. Thank you all for being here this evening. It's really wonderful to see everyone, and this is a beautiful venue. Just a real honor and delight to be here. This evening, I came prepared to read some of the work that I wrote on commission or on behalf of the McKenzie River Trust. And you're very fortunate here in Eugene and Lane County to have the McKenzie River Trust, which I understand does work and stewardship throughout this part of the state, including the coast. It's really a remarkable organization. If you're not already familiar with them, I strongly recommend that you check into their work. It's really incredible. Before I get to that that body of work. I have 7 poems. They're all relatively short. They each fit on 1 page. And I think the theme, this time of the year, for me anyway, is that it's a season where everything's changing. And it's one that I look forward to every year because I'm anticipating the snow flying. That's really my happy place is when the snow's flying. Although increasingly as I get older, I really appreciate the warmth of my bones and spending time kayaking and out of the water. So something that I've been, mulling recently and even more so today with the news that I heard is just this question of how do we approach nature? How do we approach the natural world? There are places that are protected, obviously. There are places that are distinguished, having federal protection or federal recognition, state parks and natural areas, and of course our local treasures that we all value so much. And it's sort of an interesting, paradox sometimes because the places that have been damaged, of course, are at greatest risk, and increasingly, there are fewer and fewer places that they're not touched or they're really in a pristine state, and even those that are protected with a wilderness area status and are fairly remote are changing with the changing climate and everything else that's happening in the world. And so even with our greatest efforts and investments, these places will never be what they were. And even if we were able to restore an ecosystem, the environment's changing. It's not a static state we live in. So it's really an interesting sort of question. And I think about Wendell Berry, the farmer, poet, and author, who said, there are no unsacred places. There are only sacred and desecrated places. And then he went on to say, my belief is that the world and our life in it are conditional gifts. And that's sort of how I view this work that the McKenzie Trust and other conservancies and land trusts are doing, that it's really a gift that we're giving back, or we're trying to give back. And the return on that investment is just 100-fold, 1,000-fold, because of not only the fish and wildlife that are able to return to some of the places that have previously been mined or desecrated in some way, but we as people can connect or reconnect with the environment. And so that's sort of the spirit in which I come tonight, and that's the headspace that I'm in right now. So first of all, I'll read is, I just visited my father on the East Coast, Kristin, my partner, who's going to be reading this evening, and I went to the East Coast and visited a part of the country neither of us had ever been to before in South Carolina. And it's beautiful, really, the marshes and the wildlife is extraordinary. My father's originally from Michigan, and so is Kristin. So this is Bringing You Home, and there's an epigraph by Jim Harrison. And Jim Harrison said, I've decided that when I die, I get to see all of my beloved dead people, and also my bird dogs that died if I don't screw up. So that was Jim Harrison, Bringing You Home. When I die, I'm going straight to Michigan to see my dad's hunting dogs. His father's too. Maybe we'll all hunt together, 12 gauges slung over our similarly cockeyed shoulders, as Grandpa beats a path through ash and sumac beside the Osable's black-green glare. Maybe in that burnt country, that burnt tire of backcountry, where all of our parents still know each other and some have reconciled, dogs run from house to house, lapping up food scraps and licking our faces. They know how it is with us, that we had to hide our love for 7 lifetimes, and now we can't help but think the furniture creak when they sleep, and they grin when we rise from the breakfast table, satiated and still starry from the night. Then glint and scurry with mugs of coffee sloshing out to the back 40,000 acres of state lands, where the dim and declawed revenant moon skips off the tips of jack pines, trying to keep up with the long train of pointers and retrievers in our wake. This is returning from the high country. I need to find a different line of work, one that measures progress in footfall, elevation gain and descent through transects of biome and microclimate, hurried season of bees and hummingbirds holding summer's frame still at eye level, wildflower sex at the speed of glacial till, and glaciers clinging still to the craggy roof of the world. I could make a career of camp setup and takedown, scouting food cache and unmapped spring, tracking huckleberries and morels, wading cool currents gathered in a loose shirt, casting with Angus's brown topless girl, who divines bull trout from an emerald pool with a cane pole and a red berry. I must begin and end each day like this, beside a ring of river stone, feasting on a small steely fire of my own making. And this is for the McKenzie River Trust, and it's after the Confluence property that they've taken over stewardship of the Confluence site at the confluence of the coast and the Little Forks of the Willamette. And I'm just going to read a little blurb if you're not already familiar with the work they're doing there. This is over 1,300 acres and over 6 miles, I believe, of riverfront, the upper Willamette watershed in your backyard. And it was protected when the Nature Conservancy, who purchased the property from the Wildish family, a construction mining company, I believe, in 2010, the purchase supported through conservation easement sales to the Bonneville Power Administration and the Oregon Watershed Enhancement Board. And after more than a decade of restoration work on the preserve, the Nature Conservancy transferred the property to the McKenzie River Trust in 2023 to support long-term care and stewardship of the lands. And as they describe on their website, it features extensive habitats that are increasingly endangered in the Willamette Valley. The Willamette confluence includes 6 miles of river corridors, I mentioned, floodplain forests, wetlands, upland oak woodlands, and native prairie. It's at the base of Mount Viscount. So there's a lot to take in there. There's a lot of topography. The rivers, of course, areas have been mined, quarried, and are now being restored through the good work of the trust and others. So I had an opportunity to visit the property, and with Holly McCrae is here this evening. I just want to acknowledge Holly and their staff at the trust. And it was really a great privilege to be able to tour that area just one afternoon and begin to get acquainted with it. There's much more that one could absorb there. So this is my first impression anyway, confluence for the McKenzie River Trust. I was prepared for the bitterness of creosote when I plucked the one with mustard wings, black rings and red spots around the eye. When I smudged it and rubbed the sticky residue over my thumb, I felt the warmth and weight of a century between the calapuya roasting tarweed seed on a gravel bed, salmon pushing upriver, and the abandoned quarry turned muddy conservancy land transferred. Tarweed grows wildly, sparingly on the toe slope of white oak savanna. I'm snapping pictures of flowers when Holly points at the gate and says, "We could use more eyes on the site." The climate is changing, migrating north, and her gaze at the land is deeper than time when she says, "Black might be better than white oak for the future ecological plan, better adapted to shifting latitudes." I'm looking for an eddy now, a quiet spot where I might glimpse a great blue heron, or the brown blur of an otter in the glimmer of midday sun. But the river is a straight shot. The BPA easement bisects riparian swath under the hum of power transmission lines. Public access is prohibited, but the trust is working on that. They have a vision, educational programming, sitting in nature while being Black, brown, or indigenous. Stewardship has inclusive access, experiential learning, Here, where the Middle Fork and Coast Fork meet, is the confluence of trust and reconciliation, reconnecting natural systems, repair and adaptation. This is where healing begins. Trust in the unstraightening rivers. Trust in the sweet labor of volunteers. Trust when they preach the diet for beavers, nature's master engineers. Trust in the river's muscle, heart, and lungs. I should not have been surprised by the diligence and patience of the trust, or the gentle citrus scent of tarweed. So next, we're going to go over the east side of the mountains in another part of the state where I've had the privilege to spend more than my share of time, and I'll keep taking that time as long as they keep inviting me back. And this is in an area where Playa at Summer Lake has their artist residency program. And I first went out to Playa in 2012, although I traveled through, and this is in the Great Basin. It's in an area between Lakeview and Bend, where all rivers and creeks flow into sinks. They don't go out to the Columbia or the Willamette. And it's just it's a beautiful area. It has its own ecological challenges and fragility. And this is after the Winter Ridge Fire in Fremont National Forest in 2002. After a century of fire suppression policy, despite the flames that crowned the pines and charred the scarps, despite the breaks that scarred the farms and left the blaze to blanch the snags that riddle the slopes like bones, despite the slides and floods that feed silt-laced creeks in springtime, despite the winds that rack and twine the ridges, gusts that wick and whip and bring scant rains to rise and drift and fall and rise again like ghosts. Despite the feral lightning strikes that find no fuel to flare, petroglyphs sing up there. They lisp from crooks and cracks, deep in cliffs, above hidden salt lake ponds, the sweetest Paiute songs. Hymns of cattail shoots and snakes and roots and hares, and lizards snared and skinned and cured, and bighorn rams for coats and chaps and hats and hooks, and meat to last, and meat to last the whole winter through. So getting back to just how do we connect with nature and sort of environments that have been desecrated or undergoing renewal or restoration. Look no further than your local roadside ditch. Seriously. So anyway, this is the Great Depression. It's a very short poem. The Great Depression. Snow follows a hearse, snakes along the road, gathering in furrows where children laugh, pulling sleds back up the hill. Children are closest to nature because they're closest to the ground. All right. Two more poems. And this one is, so these last two I wrote during lockdown actually, and I really didn't know what to do with them, and I had to sit with them for a while, actually a few years, to really understand what they mean. I'm still trying to understand what they mean, but maybe it'll connect with you. So this is 6 versions of the first day of spring, and there's 6 stanzas. There are 4 lines in each stanza. So 6 versions of the first day of spring. When I went outside, the outside let itself in, just to see if I was all there. And I was, sort of, in a way the world will still be here when it all comes to an end. When I went outside, I extended my arms and waited for another human to approach. And when they did, we tried, but could not touch. When I went outside, I was really seated at the breakfast table, sheltering in place, listening to a bee bounce repeatedly against the window, an invisible bee. When I went outside, the sky had grown leaden. The garden was overgrown with crows who pasted their wet capes. No one had told the weeds about the need for social distancing. When I went outside, a prop plane grazed the sky, loving it silently like a virus. The world was impossibly blue, beautiful but impassable as the inside of the balloon. When I went outside to walk the dog, she stalled beside a neighbor's house where the uppermost branchlets of the plum had begun to blister and burst into flame. So that could just go on and on and on. You know, it's like at some point it has to sort of close. And that's where I went with it. So the last one I'll just leave you with, I called it Anthem, and I wrote it, during the time of COVID. But I think I'm actually willing to own it and live with it as my credo, or sort of my anthem for you. Anthem. When you are lost, let me be your island. When thoughts go dark, I'll be your range of light. When you have no words, I can be your words, like hands on sore shoulders, cool water on a blistering day. When you're cold, I'll be your shawl. When overworked, I'm your lunch break or your getaway car. When you say, I'm afraid, and even when you won't, I am here for you. If you are broke, I am a bundle of hundreds found on the street. Look at me, one human to another. I am free for the taking, and I am taking this moment to tell you, I love you so.
That time went by too fast. Anyway, our next reader, and you can all hear me, yes? Our next reader is Kristin Berger, and she is the author of 6 poetry collections, including Earthwork, The Poetry Box 2022, and Changing Woman, Changing Man, A High Desert Myth from Nightjar Press 2022. She serves as poet on the land for Green Island of McKenzie River Trust and Mosier Plateau Preserve with the Friends of the Columbia Gorge, a project of writing the land, which pairs poets with nature, preserves, and state federal lands. Kristin lives in Oregon. More at KristinBergerPoet.com. Welcome, Kristin.
Thank you so much. You all for coming out tonight.
Stop talking.
So many things. And yeah, I won't go over everything about McKenzie River Land Trust because Scott did such a great job. But I did want to talk about the project a little bit, and I'll read my poem a little bit into the reading. But this project that we were invited to be part of, it was actually from Brittany Corrigan, who was the other poet that you worked with, Holly. Who I'd had been.
And you have to hear it echo in your ear.
Okay.
Can you hear it now?
Yes.
Do I have to read everything I just said?
Yes. It wasn't important. No. The Writing the Land project was, it's an ongoing project. It's been going on for a few years. It's been, it started in New York City with Liz McLaughlin, who is, I don't know if she's a poet, but she's a poet enthusiast, and she has grouped poets and connected them to various land trusts and reserves and wildlands, mostly in the East Coast, and published different anthologies as the years have gone on and as the regions have opened up. So about 2 years ago, we were approached by, I'm trying, it's really hard to make out with this microphone. It's gonna be a whole different kind of show. Yeah, so we found out about it and said, you know, there's just a map and you could go and pick your land. And I would love to do anything in the west, but the reality is we have like a 2-hour window of travel time that we can usually get to. And so this worked out really well. And I was paired with Green Island, which is out in Coburg on the river. I guess I just gave myself that title as Poet on the Land. It's not official, but it's now mine. And then I've also been paired with another property out in Mosier, the Mosier Plateau. So it's a really great program to sort of connect people. There's a really small stipend, but it's not about that. It's just about being with people who work these properties, really have intimate knowledge, spending some time with them and understanding how this came to be, how these pieces of property got to be protected, their stories, and sort of their vision too. So it's just an exciting thing to be a part of. And so yeah, this one is Writing the Land Channels. It just came out. They just had their book launch, I think, last weekend. So I encourage you to go online and look at this and order it if you're interested. And so I'm going to back up a little bit and just read some other poems first. They're weird poems. I haven't written a whole lot through the pandemic, but I did get a book published, which was an odd collection of older poems about my kids, pandemic poems, and then some newer poems. And then I've had a bunch of life changes, and what I've returned to are poems that basically sit on the page like this. And I could work at them and maybe add some form to them, but right now I'm really enjoying just the heft of them, because for a long time I haven't felt like I've had anything much to work with in my own craft. So this will probably change, but these are some newer poems, and it's about craft of poetry. Heart training. Hey poet, are you living your best life? Are you living life in your best way? Are you giving your best to the long ask of life? Make the list after you're done with the day. Fill the blank space before sleep with yesterday. Tomorrow will come, or it won't. Sleep is your friend, but don't be surprised if you never wake up. Or if your dreams are overrun with love and side roads blocked with snow. Someone is shoveling away. Your life is right there under it all, like cold blades of grass pushing up. Live your life as if you are walking barefoot. Every toe is glad. Green will smudge your heels. You won't be able to help but run. Keep opening your heart to the stain of rain, supermoon glow, peach sugar, grief. You'll only know if your best life is in the room, if you followed every word you've laid down and only now come up for breath. So Ada Limon, the poet laureate, has been, sometimes poets can feel like your best friends, even if you've never met them. And I have all of her books tucked on my nightstand. I take them on trips. I reread, and I just love her so much that sometimes I forget to write my own stuff because I'm just reading hers. Why write anything that you're not able to writing? So this is reading Ada Limon by the Sea. Means birds begin to belong to their calls again. Suddenly, horses claim the landscape. The mountain-crumbled fog and light moves across the foxglove meadow we breathed in. Moments become moments again. Children become, revert, gallop, their shadows long as whips.
The cool sand is a wordless pleasure. Her eyes become my eyes, which is the only trick of light a poet knows.
And I think what's wonderful about a poet that really reaches into you is that, sometimes you don't even realize you need permission to write about certain things, or that you haven't been looking at things honestly. And so to have an honest poet like someone like Ada, or even Jim Harrison is one of mine, who just like says it as one as he did. I think that's just one of the gifts of having a poet in the room, in your heart, and why it's important to keep bringing them out. Poet laureates. I mean, that's just a cool thing. I hope it never ends. We have state poet laureates. We have county poet laureates. We have city poet laureates. So long may it continue. So I'm going to read my poem. This is just a blunt change of course into this poem, because I've just been really excited to share it. I have not read this at a reading. It's been recorded. This Green Island poem has been recorded, and it's on the Writing the Land's website, I believe. And I'm going to put it on mine as well. But yeah, so I got to go with Holly for one visit, and I'm trying to remember. We kept trying to meet, and it was during the big rains not this April, but the April before. So the exit or the entrance was completely flooded, so I couldn't even get on the land. And then I came. I think it must have been it was in October. So it was just really beautiful down there. And then I brought my oldest child, and we got to walk around. And then I came back with Scott in December and got to see it at just a different personality to the land. And I love walking anywhere in the winter just because everything just feels much more clear. All the leaves are gone. You can just see the bones of the land. So this is sort of based on those two visits. My goal had been to come every season, but that hasn't happened yet. So I'll be back. Seasons of Green Island. Flood season, in which two rivers rival to swallow island whole and green. Grasses loosen and eddies remember back roads. Enter the season of returning. Island always wanted to be a gravel bar. River always needed to be a mouth. Both hold to their own dreaming currents like stories parents tell their children at night. See past where the gate corrals the road. Island breaching, river diving, like otter, the dark seam of hunger, weave of play. Otter season. When a river slows to rest, it nudges otter to slide up a willing bank, find a wide, flat rock, look back at the flume and channel, tumble of its own making. River runs its course around old working earth, a farm, a memory of horses and fruit planted on a peninsula of repose. Otters shiver to slide back into the frenzy, the point of her obsidian gaze settling below river skin, spring chinook shivering back, both ellipses of hungry life. Bluebird season. All winter, bright birdhouses perch painted and poised above flattened grasses, flags of whimsy between whips of oaks, stretching their closed palms to the sky. Gauguin, Van Gogh, Picasso, Cezanne, O'Keeffe, Chagall. Do bluebirds recognize this unplaying air museum as the poshest tiny homes in the valley? Everyone should be so welcomed with such strokes of awe and care. Stand at a distance. The impression will blur and blue your air. Gravel bar season. The soul of the island lives below the river. Gravel plains of glacial tills shift and spread, polish themselves when no one is looking.
Where you spread your summer blanket over pebble coals has succumbed to a river swarm, a cut bank of speed and need. Each castaway upon this nib and basalt chip, washed in hypereic freshet and flow, will find their place in the order of things, like salmon that swing through ribbons of chartreuse silt towards the scent of home. Island season. Green Island never ends. It dreams on and dreams in reverse. Edges polished by rain and snowmelt, by the featherwork of the sun. Remembers ferry shoveling a farmer to higher fertile ground, the ramp now swamped by a back channel. Merganser shunts, kingfisher patrols. Island dreams back farther to when the Playa knew it best. What you think you'll remember pivots on a tree swallow's glinting wing, the past hovering just below the future. Islands and rivers live above us, within. They will never forget their maps. Rechanneled, restored, confluencing. They tell old stories to oak saplings to tap and hold, reach and change, adapt, but always be the great dream.
So I think I have time for two more. And I want to just do a shout out for this book that was published last year by a small press in Portland called Poetry Box. So if you're not familiar with this little press, they put out at least, I think, 4 books a year and several chapbooks. Sean is a great supporter of poets, does amazing readings online. And so I know Eugene has a wonderful, vibrant poetry community, and Portland has that, too. And I think we have such, we have wealth among all of us, up and down the valley, all the way across the state. So if you're not familiar with this publisher, I encourage you to seek her out. So I'm going to read 2 poems, and one is it's a little bit of an urban poem, and I was thinking about it tonight because I haven't been down to this part of Eugene. I've been to different parts, and every time I'm here, I'm like, I've never been here. I've been here several times. But I've never been in this library, and this whole intersection outside was just, for a Wednesday night, it's just very vibrant to see people just coming into the library, children, and, houseless folks, and, the people just love books, and they love being together. So this is a poem for the people, called Crosswalk. We are here to keep each other up. The only truth I can make of a day in which an SUV nearly runs over a woman in the rain, and someone pulls over to ask, "Are you okay?" I sigh my gratitude and relief to no one. For the quince branch blooming in the bakery window, for the first customer coming in from the wet dark for coffee and bread, for butter and the hands that pound it, for hands that massage grief from the body, unknot us from ourselves, teach us the lost art of self-care, for bush tits arriving on time to devour a sweet suet cake, the shape crumbling little by little, ornament of seed twirl and hunger, a warbler tucked into the flock like family. How do we guard this grace against the next flurry of the here and the departed? Life of water, branch, seed, and cell. Blueprint of city, road, us. Woman crossing to her next curve of safety. We could be the joy deliverers we need. We could stop all traffic. This last poem I'll read is for a special little spot in Portland. It's actually in Milwaukie, which is south of Portland. It's called Elk Rock, and it's this little tiny island in the middle of the Willamette. There's a little path from Milwaukee you can take out there. And in the summer when the water is really low, you can cross this little bridge and get to it, but otherwise you can't cross over and get to this little island. So it's a fun place to take your kids in the summer when they have nothing else to do. And also just teach them how land can be there and then be not there. So this is called Earth Bridge. Dear world, where would I be without you? Under the green blue river, pillowing clay banks, river slitting through milky fog, clear as day. I can see all the ways forward and behind. Nests in leafless cottonwoods poised to clutch an eagle, a heron. I want to hold someone without thinking. How you pin me between here and there, that unreachable island. Dear blue envelope, please don't spill. Contain this love for the other side. Be the foothold, my submerged terra firma. Keep us on the span where the water goes down. Thank you.
So our two poets think that they, can you hear me now? Yeah, they think they're free, but they're not. Erica Doss, who is the co-host of this series, with me and Wendy, makes it a job for herself to create interesting questions to ask the poets, or the authors, or whoever is reading. And she used to walk around with a microphone, but it didn't work for the, for the people of long distance, the live stream listeners. So I think I'm going to ask her to ask them to come up here and ask their questions into the mic and answer the questions. So, Erica Doss, our question creator.
Thank you, Joan. Okay, I have some questions for our poets. And what I would like to do is ask each one of you the same question, but not in the same order every time. Because I found that if you do that, then the second person will say, oh yeah, I agree with him. And you're like, that's nice. So to avoid that excessive amount of agreement, I'm going to ask these questions in different order. So I'm going to start with Scott. So Scott, you're here. This is a question that I struggle with myself because I actually don't know the answer for myself.
Can we be on either side?
Yeah,
Like
that would
do
be
like
great.
a buzzer, like a.
Okay, over here. Absolutely. That's great. So, because sometimes I say yes and no to this, but the question I have for you, Scott, is: does writing tire you out or give you energy?
Yes.
Can you be more specific?
Both. I think about times when I've been up at 2 a.m. sometimes writing because I'm on a thread and I have to follow it through. And I'm not tired, and obviously there's something in there. It's not THC or it's poetry. And then there are other times where it's just exhausting and I feel like I'm getting nowhere, and that's probably a good time to put it down for a while. I think that the best feeling of all is having put something down on the page. It doesn't have to be publishable. It doesn't even have to be coherent. You're just putting something down. It's like, that took some effort, but I feel good about this. I feel good. It's kind of like exercise. If you do a little workout, you feel like you've accomplished something. And so I think it's a good sort of fatigue.
A good sort of fatigue. I like that. Kristin, how about you?
I agree.
Could you be more specific?
Yes. I actually, yeah, I mean, I do once you're in it, it can feel like, depending on what you're writing about, it can take some emotional, like, work. You know, it's not physical, but it feels physical in that you're exerting your heart. You're trying to get at something, but I also don't try that hard. I try to stay pretty loose and just let things come through. But I find that, like, actually avoiding writing is exhausting. So I can have it on my, like, I gotta do that, or like this line keeps bothering me, or just like I haven't made that space in my life, and that sort of inner guilt, shamer poet person saying like, you should be writing, you know, it's like, that's actually more exhausting. So I like the energy that comes from actually doing the work. Thank you.
Good answers, Al. I'm going to start with you on this question. What period of your life do you write about most?
Right now, I think. Yeah. I mean, I've tried to write about the past, like family stuff, but that's hard. So I tend to avoid it, and then write about what's right in front of me, or something that, I mean, I've had some things that I moved about a year and a half ago, and so there's a lot of old writings that kind of came like out of the closets, and I've thought of going back to those things. So and they're very rooted in the past, but yeah, I don't know how to answer that. But what's in front of me?
You did a good job. Yeah. Scott?
Thank you. Great question. So I write about the past, the present, and the future. And sometimes I write about all three at once. I even have a poem that's called Four Tenses. I can't remember if I had it in my memory or recited it. I think I write about different tenses depending on what I mean, I'm not really intentional about it, but I think I sort of slip into a mode where I'm writing about the past or I'm writing from memory, I'm trying to process something. Like there's something unresolved there. I mean, it might be happiness, it might be joy, or it might be something, some trauma, that I'm still processing. And I've written some of the poems that I think have been successful just from like a craft standpoint, and also just from like publishing is one of the outcomes that you're looking for, like memory poems that have made it into a journal or have received some acknowledgement in contest. Because I feel like writing, when I'm processing something from the past, it's the heaviest, hardest work there is, for me anyway. And so maybe I invest more of myself in that versus maybe more free flow understream of consciousness and what's happening right now. They're just different work products, I think, and so I will sort of shift past, present, and future depending on what it is that what headspace I'm in. Hope that answers the question.
No, thanks. Great answers, you too. Okay, so Scott, I'm going to direct this question to you first. Is there a writer whose work inspires you but writes in a different genre than you do? Like you write poetry, you write fantasy fiction or something.
Well, there are a lot of nonfiction writers who have inspired me over the years, and Edward Abbey early on, and I just love, from a craft standpoint, Edward Abbey, he's a cantankerous environmentalist, the inspiration, the bird first and monkey rich getting on, and I just, his sentences would just go on and on and on and on, and you'd actually like, okay, stay with it. It's like, I want to know where he's going with this. So anyway, I think just the breaking the rules, the novelist Edward Abbey breaking the rules, and also as a nonfiction writer, I started out talking about nonfiction, but writers like John Daniels, who's from, is he from Eugene? Maybe Brook Valley, is he from Eugene?
No tie.
Hi, Tim.
Hi.
Yeah, so, and other essayists, Barry Lopez, and just a couple of those. Even back earlier, Wallace Snyder, I think, a novelist. So, yeah, there are a lot of different writers and John, who work in other genres and other forms who I really admire and inspire me.
Well, I can't say exactly the same. That would be obvious. But Barry Lopez is one that I started reading in college, and really, actually his stories woke me up to the second person narrative. So I did a lot of creative nonfiction in a fiction class, and it was actually with Stuart Dybek, who is a fiction writer, and he pulled me aside and he's like, because people were like, what is this? This is not fiction. This is weird. And he said, I know what you're doing. I know Barry Lopez. He's a good friend of mine. So, and just his nonfiction has inspired my poetry, my essays. And Terry Tempest Williams is someone who has really affected my poetry more than my nonfiction, but I think because her work continues to be really brave in its like doesn't it's not defined by any sort of genre, and she is just curious on the page and curious with form and curious with impact of what she's saying. So those are two that are really important. And then fiction, Anthony Doerr is one of my favorites. I used to write fiction. I would love to get back into it, but like when I'm in this world, I just forget about everybody. So.
Both of you, those are great suggestions, and I just want to say, I think our library has those by all of those people.
Yes.
So, right?
Yes.
So,
Large print, regular print.
Thank you both. So this is my last question. It's kind of a wild card question I'm going to ask Kristin first. You know how you were talking about who's going to read my stuff? You're writing about stuff that's personal, that might hurt someone's feelings or reveal something about them that they don't want revealed. And I have often thought, well, why not use a pseudonym? Have you ever thought of using a pseudonym? No. Never. And why?
Why? I want people to know it's me. I don't know how to answer that.
Yeah, I thought about it just as an experiment, actually, to see if I might be able to place some poems in certain journals that are really rejected. Some might do it.
I think there was a recent scandal about that. Someone was faking an ethnicity that they did not actually possess, and yeah, they were outed. But yeah, it's interesting to think about. Would you be freer in your writing? Wendy, are there any questions from our?
There are no questions on the YouTube channel, but there are some really nice comments. So if you go to the Eugene, YouTube, Eugene LRCS, Library Rec Cultural Services, you'll see all sorts of nice comments for both authors, from people you may know or may not. But yeah, read those. No questions, just some lovely comments, and there have been no email questions.
Is it on my mom?
One of them is, yes, why don't you call me enough? No. Yeah, no, I don't think so. Yeah, really nice comments though.
Okay, does anyone in the audience have a question for Scott and Kristin? If you do, I will come over, or if you do, just say it and I'll repeat it.
Yes. Well, I thank you both for this fantastic reading. I've enjoyed it so much. And I just wanted to ask Scott about working with form and working with rhyme, which I heard you doing a lot. And I haven't seen your poems on the page, so I'm not familiar with how you're doing that. Could you say a little bit about form and rhyme as you write?
Okay, the question was, for Scott, can you talk a little bit about your use of form and rhyme in your writing?
Okay, Thank you for the question, and that, I could go on a long time about that, form and rhyme. And I think that it all comes down to sound. And for me, poetry has always been an auditory thing. And I think, form follows sound or follows the function of the poem. So I think I start with the sound, and some poems lend themselves, or some thoughts lend themselves to longer lines. A longer line calls for slowing down, I think. I think, there's meter and there's lineation, and where you place the line break and emphasize or de-emphasize certain words or ideas. So I'm thinking about probably all three of those things. Is that there are internal rhymes, there are sort of oblique rhymes that are not really direct, that you can use that as a device to sort of elevate certain ideas or amplify certain images. So anyway, I'm just thinking about all of those as interrelated. And on the page, you're welcome to please take a look at our work. We have books here, as was mentioned. And I have spent some time, and one of the books that I brought with me today, The Constellation of Extinct Stars, has a whole sequence of sonnets in the first section of the book. It's all persona poems in a sonnet form. So if you're interested in that sort of thing, you can see how at least one way to approach that.
Great question and great answer. Are there any other questions? This is your last chance. Going once, going twice. Okay, if there are no more questions, I just want to remind everyone that it is our goal to not let our readers go home with any books, okay? So please go over and look at their beautiful books. I've browsed a few already, and I'm sure that you would love to have some books in your home. And I also point out that poetry makes a great gift. Holidays are coming up, so shockingly. Thank you, everyone, for coming to Windfall, and thank you, Wendy.
Before you all go up and buy your books and stuff like that, I want to let you know that we are going to have a reading here again on January 17th, 2024. We do not have a reading in December. We will have a reading on January 17th. The two readers will be Richard Robbins and Thomas Mitchell. And you can find a flyer about them to take home with you as you walk out the door. But you don't walk out the door unless you have a book in your hand. That's the